The town was hit by a plague. My husband Finley's childhood sweetheart and I were both infected. Finley decided to give the last bowl of medicine to her. I didn't fight or scream. I just quietly agreed. In my past life, Finley had given the medicine to me because I was newly pregnant. That led to Lydia suffering from a lifelong chronic cough. Finley blamed everything on me. He forced me to take a pill to end my pregnancy and made sure I could never have children again. He threw me out into a blizzard on a freezing mountain. He told me he wanted me to feel the same pain Lydia felt every day. Eventually, I died from the illness and the cold. Now that I've been reborn, I don't want him or the child anymore. I just came from old Silas's place. Too many people are sick, and there's only one dose of medicine left. Finley walked into the room with the bowl and went straight to the bed. He looked at Lydia with pure heartbreak. I'm going to give this to you, Lydia. Gwen is stronger than you. She can wait a few more days without dying. I was lying on a thin mat on the hardwood floor. A bitter smile touched my lips. Ever since Lydia got sick, Finley had panicked and brought her into our home. He even gave her our only bed. We were both sick, but I was his wife. Yet, I was the one relegated to a mat on the floor. Looking at Lydia, Finley had completely forgotten that I was carrying his baby. Lydia looked down at me from the bed. Her eyes were full of triumph, but she pretended to be reluctant. Finley, maybe Gwen should have it. She's pregnant after all. She coughed twice, her voice dripping with fake concern. I wonder if the baby is bad luck. The plague started right after she found out she was pregnant. Her implication was crystal clear. Finley immediately turned his cold gaze toward me. He looked at my stomach with suspicion and annoyance. Lydia is right. This baby came at the worst time. It must be a curse. So Lydia gets the medicine first. Think of it as making up for the trouble you've caused her. His cold expression and heartless words pierced my heart. This was his child too. But in front of Lydia, it was just my problem. To him, the baby was nothing but a disaster. It was the same in my last life. I thought Finley just acted like he didn't want the baby but was secretly happy. I didn't listen to his cruel words and fought to keep the child. I even used his late father's wish for a grandson to force him to give me the medicine. He did it, but he spent the rest of his life torturing me for it. He made me pay back that one bowl of medicine for decades. This time, I won't force anything. I don't want the baby, and I definitely don't want him. I answered quietly, my voice submissive. Fine. Give it to her. Finley immediately began feeding Lydia the medicine spoon by spoon. He didn't even glance at me once. Lydia coughed weakly and looked at me with mockery. Gwen, I'm not feeling well. Could you please wash this bowl and take it back to old Silas? She was an expert at using weakness to control people. In my last life, she used this act to keep Finley tied to her for years. I had spent half my life arguing with him because he always took her side. I just wanted him to stand up for me once. I wanted one look of pity or love. I never got it. The sickness made me weak. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. I just coughed into the dusty air of the room. Finley glared at me, his patience gone. Why are you still lying there? Get up and return the bowl. Can't you see Lydia needs to rest? Your coughing is keeping her awake. I laughed to myself. This was the man I had loved with all my soul in my previous life. He cared about his sweetheart's sleep, but forgot his wife was sick and pregnant. I didn't argue. I dragged myself up and took the bowl to the kitchen. Then, I walked to old Silas's cabin. After returning the bowl, I asked him for a different prescription. It was another remedy for the plague. Old Silas hesitated as he prepared the herbs. Gwen, honey, why do you want this specific mix? You know this will make it impossible for you to ever have children again. I didn't answer him. I just took the medicine and drank it all at once. In my last life, this was a new formula discovered after the outbreak. It cured the fever, but the side effect was permanent infertility. I rubbed my stomach, silently saying goodbye to the little life inside me. Finley hated me so much. I didn't want to bring an innocent child into this mess. It was better to end it now and break clean. As soon as I stepped back into the house, I heard Finley's panicked voice. He was patting Lydia's back, his face full of worry. Why is the coughing getting worse? I'm going back to old Silas for more medicine. I leaned against the doorframe, clutching my aching stomach. That bowl of medicine I brought back earlier came with instructions. Old Silas had told me it was very strong and needed to be taken in 2 doses. Finley had been in such a rush to help Lydia that he didn't even let me speak. He had forced her to drink the whole thing at once. Now Lydia was hacking violently. Finley shot me a dark look before rushing out the door. He came back a few minutes later, exploding with rage. He marched over and screamed in my face. Gwen, you heartless bitch. You knew that medicine was too strong. Why didn't you tell me it had to be split into 2 doses? I was curled up on the cold floor. My stomach felt like it was being twisted by hot pliers. I was so weak I could barely hear him. I tried to explain, but the pain took my voice away. Finley grabbed me by the shoulder and shook me. Stop acting like a mute. And why didn't you get medicine for Lydia when you went back to the clinic? I broke into a cold sweat. I grabbed his sleeve and whispered, "My stomach hurts so much. Please take me to the clinic." Finley let out a sharp, cruel laugh. He threw me back onto the floor. "You're just trying to get me away from Lydia, aren't you? Keep dreaming." He turned his back on me and scooped Lydia up from the bed. He stroked her face gently. "I'm taking you to the doctor, Lydia. Just hold on." I was shaking uncontrollably. I felt a warm rush of liquid between my legs. I looked down and saw the blood staining my clothes. Finley carried Lydia past me. He looked down for a split second and saw the blood. His brow furrowed, but his voice stayed venomous. "You're really putting on a show today. Honestly, it's better if you lose that baby. A child from a woman as evil as you would only grow up to be a monster anyway." He glared at me with pure disgust. He even covered his nose as if the smell of my blood offended him. Then he walked out without looking back. It was Mrs. Miller from the local community board who eventually found me. She rushed me to the clinic and stayed by my side until I woke up. She held my hand, her eyes red with tears. "I'm so sorry, Gwen. You can always have another baby later." I touched my empty stomach. Tears leaked from my eyes. "No. Y whisperat. There won't be another one." I was done with children, and I was done with Finley. 5 years ago, Finley and I used to talk about our future children all the time. He promised to give me the best life. He said we would have a real home. Back then he actually loved me. He wasn't the man with the frozen heart I saw today. He never let me do chores in the kitchen. Even when the neighbor said a wife belonged in the kitchen, he would just smile. "Gwen's hands are meant for the piano," he'd say. "I'll handle the work so she can do what she loves." He knew I had always wanted a piano. He saved up for years to buy me one. I cried when it arrived and told him it was too expensive, but he just kissed my forehead. "Your happiness is worth more than any amount of money," he whispered. Everyone in the village thought he was the perfect husband. He was romantic back then. He took me to the city for candlelit dinners. He danced with me in our living room while I played the keys. That happiness lasted 3 years. Everything changed when Lydia came back to town. Finley started spending all his time with her. They worked together and went to city events together. At first, he told me where he was going. Later, he wouldn't even answer my questions. I watched them get closer and closer. I remembered telling him once, "Lydia is a single mom now and her life is hard. You should help her out when you can." I never expected him to give her his entire soul. I tried to talk to him, thinking our love was worth saving. But then, a massive misunderstanding ruined everything. Lydia claimed I was jealous of her easy job and that I pushed her, causing her to lose her baby. Her husband in the city divorced her immediately after that. At first, Finley didn't believe I did it. But then Lydia showed him a medical report saying the loss was caused by a physical impact. I was the only one who had visited her that day. After that, Finley stopped taking me to the city. He even moved my piano to Lydia's house. He stopped the plans for our official wedding ceremony. Now I realize I should have left the moment he chose her words over mine. I was just addicted to the memory of the man he used to be. It took me half a lifetime to realize he didn't love me anymore. Finally, my heart was dead. I wrote a letter to my parents telling them I was coming home tomorrow. They had been begging me to leave Finley for years. This time, I was actually going to do it. When I got home from the clinic, Finley wasn't there. I had seen him once while I was at the facility. He was walking with Lydia in the garden, supporting her weight. He had looked at me with pure loathing and walked right past. It wasn't a surprise. Lydia would be in the hospital for 2 weeks, and he would stay by her side every second. I packed my bags and handed in my resignation at the local store. I left a final letter on the dining table. 5 years of memories, both sweet and bitter, were finally over. Just as I put the letter down, Mrs. Miller arrived with some women from the community office. They brought soup and vitamins. Mrs. Miller patted my hand sympathetically. "You're young, Gwen. You and Finley will have another chance. You just need to rest now." Mrs. Miller must have told them how much blood there was on the floor. They all looked at me with pity. While they were trying to comfort me, Finley walked in. He heard the end of the conversation and scoffed. He looked at my stomach with a mocking sneer. "Give it a rest, Mrs. Miller. Gwen wanted that baby more than anything. She even tried to steal Lydia's medicine to save it. There's no way she'd let herself lose it." He grabbed the vitamins and soup from the table. "You really spent a lot of money to get these ladies to act with you, didn't you? Good. Lydia actually needs these." The room went silent. Mrs. Miller sighed and looked at him. "Finley, I know you're upset about the baby, but it's true. Gwen lost the child." Finley's brow deepened. He stepped closer to me, his voice like ice. "Stop lying to me, Gwen. I know you went to old Silas for medicine that causes bleeding. You just wanted me to think you lost it. That baby was a curse anyway. It's too stubborn to just disappear like that." He was turning red with anger, looking like he wanted to strike me. I stared into his eyes. All I felt was disappointment. Even with blood everywhere, he thought I was just playing a game. Mrs. Miller snapped at him. How can you say that? She bled so much that day, and you didn't even check on her. Finley stared at me, waiting for me to break. When I didn't say anything, he yelled at Mrs. Miller. She's faking. Lydia was actually sick. I didn't have time for Gwen's drama. Mrs. Miller tried to argue more, but I stopped her. I was leaving tomorrow. I didn't want to be the center of a scandal anymore. I pulled out my discharge papers and handed them to Finley. I looked him in the eye, my voice calm. The baby is gone. And I will never have another one. Finley looked at the papers. For a second, he looked lost. Then he smirked again. Papers can be faked. I know what kind of woman you are, Gwen. I spoke softly. If you don't believe me, go ask the doctor or old Silas. They'll tell you the truth. But right now, I have something else to tell you. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. It was crisp white and carried none of the grime of our small town. I laid it flat on the dining table, right next to the bowl of soup Finley had just confiscated for Lydia. Finley's eyes darted to the paper, his brow furrowing deeper. What is this? Another fake report. It's a divorce agreement, I said, my voice steady, carrying a calmness that seemed to echo in the quiet kitchen. I've already signed it. The house, the plot of land, and whatever savings we have left, you can keep them all. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. I don't want a single penny from you. Finley froze. For a second, the arrogant, suspicious mask on his face cracked, revealing a flash of absolute bewilderment. He looked at the signature at the bottom of the page, Gwen Sullivan, written in the neat, elegant script he used to praise when we first met. Then he let out a sharp, mocking scoff. He tossed the soup container onto the counter, splashing a few drops of broth onto the floor. Divorce? He sneered, crossing his arms. Gwen, you've really outdone yourself. This time. Is this your new strategy? Because I didn't give you the medicine. You're going to threaten me with divorce to get my attention? You think I'll beg you to stay? I don't think you'll beg, I said, looking at him with a detachment that surprised even myself. I know you won't. And that's why I've already packed my things. I pointed to the single suitcase resting by the back door. It was small, containing only a few changes of clothes, my childhood journals, and the letters my parents had sent me over the years. I had left behind every dress he had bought me, every piece of jewelry, and every memory of the 3 years we spent in domestic bliss before Lydia returned. Finley's gaze shifted to the suitcase. A flicker of uneasiness crossed his eyes, but his pride quickly swallowed it. He stepped closer, his voice dripping with venom. Fine. If you want to play the martyr, go ahead. Let's see how long you last in the city without me. Let's see how your prestigious parents react when their precious daughter comes crawling back, divorced and empty-handed. They will be glad, I whispered. They've been waiting for me to wake up for 2 years. You're pathetic, Finley spat, turning his back on me. He picked up the vitamins and the soup. Lydia is waiting. When you're done with your little tantrum, the keys are on the hook. Don't expect me to come looking for you. He walked out, slamming the heavy wooden door behind him. The vibration rattled the windows of the cottage, but it didn't shake my heart. I looked around the quiet living room. 5 years ago, we had stood in this very room, dancing to a silent melody while the rain pattered against the glass. He had held me so tight, whispering that he would protect me from the storms of the world. In my past life, I had clung to that whisper until the cold mountain air froze the blood in my veins. Now I walked over to the table, took our brass house key off the ring, and placed it gently on top of the divorce papers. I was finally free. The city was different from the small, suffocating town of our childhood. It was loud, bustling, and smelled of coal smoke and fresh rain. My parents received me at the train station without a single word of reproach. My mother simply held me in her arms, weeping quietly into my shoulder, while my father took my suitcase and patted my back with a steady, comforting hand. They didn't ask about the baby. Mrs. Miller had already written to them, explaining the circumstances of my sudden hospitalization. Within a week, I was settled into my old room. My father had hired a tuner to restore the grand piano in the parlor, and the clean, resonant notes began to fill the empty spaces in my soul. I practiced until my fingertips ached, using the music to drown out the phantom whispers of a life I had left behind. Meanwhile, back in the village, the autumn dampness had turned into a biting, early winter frost. Finley stood in the doorway of old Silas's cabin, his collar pulled up against the cold wind. He tossed a silver coin onto the wooden table. I need more of the throat-soothing herbs for Lydia, Finley said, his voice carrying the impatient, demanding tone that had become his second nature. The chronic cough is keeping her awake again. Old Silas didn't touch the coin. He sat by his hearth, slowly rocking in his chair, staring at the glowing embers. The old doctor's eyes, usually warm and patient, turned cold as ice as they slowly shifted to Finley's face. Take your money and get out, Finley, Silas said, his voice flat and heavy. I don't sell herbs to beasts. Finley's face flushed with anger. He stepped forward, slamming his hand on the table. What is your problem, old man? I'm paying you. Lydia is sick, and as the town doctor, you have a duty. Lydia is sick because you gave her a double dose of a highly volatile medicine. Without letting your wife speak, Silas roared, standing up with a sudden, surprising strength. And Gwen is barren for the rest of her life because of you. Finley froze, his hand still pressed against the table. He scoffed, though his voice shook slightly. What are you talking about? Gwen faked those discharge papers. She went to the city hospital to put on a show because she wanted to make me feel guilty for saving Lydia. 3. Faked. Silas let out a dry, bitter laugh. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, dried black root, tossing it onto the table. Do you know what this is, Finley? No. It's black root, Silas said, his eyes drilling into Finley's. It's a rare cure for the plague. It drives the fever out of the body, but it has a secondary effect. It burns the lining of the womb. It destroys the tissue completely. 3 weeks ago, Gwen came to my clinic. She sat in that very chair, looked me in the eye, and asked for the blackroot infusion. Finley's breath caught in his throat. His heart began to hammer against his ribs with a sudden, sickening speed. No, she wouldn't. She drank it right in front of me, Silas whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and anger. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. I asked her why she wanted to destroy her own body. And do you know what she told me? Finley couldn't speak. His throat felt like it was coated in sand. She said, Silas continued, that she would rather burn her own womb to ashes than carry the child of a man who would watch her bleed to death on a cold floor. She drank the poison to rid herself of your blood, Finley. She didn't lose the baby to an accident. She chose to destroy her fertility completely, just to ensure she would never have to be bound to you again. Finley stumbled backward, his knees hitting the wooden stool behind him. The small, crowded cabin seemed to spin around him. She chose to destroy it. She drank poison to rid herself of my blood. And the blood you saw on the floor? Silas's voice followed him like a physical blow. It wasn't a show. Mrs. Miller had to drag her through the mud because her uterus was hemorrhaging from the toxicity of the herb. The city doctors said that if they had been 10 minutes later, she would have bled to death in that empty house. While you were holding Lydia's hand in the clinic garden, your wife was dying in a pool of her own blood. 2-3. Finley shook his head frantically, his face turning a terrifying shade of white. No, that's a lie. She was faking. She wanted the medicine. Go to the city hospital yourself, you coward. Silas spat, turning his back on him. Ask the head surgeon. He'll show you the records. And then take your sweetheart and get out of my sight. The sight of you makes me sick. Finley didn't go back to the clinic. He ran. He ran through the muddy, freezing streets of the village, his lungs burning, the cold wind slicing through his clothes. He burst into his own house, his chest heaving as he stared at the quiet, empty kitchen. The house was cold. The stove hadn't been lit, and the faint, sweet scent of lavender that Gwen used to place in the cupboards was entirely gone, replaced by the damp, musty smell of neglect. On the dining table, the brass key still sat on top of the divorce papers, untouched, exactly where Gwen had left them. 1-3. Finley. Lydia's weak, coughing voice drifted from the bedroom. She walked out, slowly, wrapped in one of Gwen's hand-woven woolen shawls, her face pale but her eyes sharp. Where have you been? She pouted, her voice dripping with that familiar, delicate weakness. The fire went out, and my throat is so dry. Did you get the herbs from old Silas? Finley stared at her. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't see the innocent, tragic childhood sweetheart who needed his protection. He saw the woman who had moved into his home, taken his wife's bed, and demanded his undivided attention while his wife was losing her life on the floor. Finley. Lydia asked again, her brow furrowing. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Did Gwen push you 5 years ago? Finley asked, his voice low, completely devoid of any emotion. Lydia froze. The delicate, pitiful expression on her face flickered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a sudden, defensive tension. What? Of course. She did. Finley, why are you asking this now? We've talked about this 1,000 times. She was jealous because I'm going to the city tomorrow. Finley cut her off, his voice flat. I'm going to check the hospital records. For Gwen, and for you. Finley, no. Lydia reached out, her fingers grabbing his sleeve. You can't leave me here. I'm still sick. The chronic cough. You have a cough, Lydia, Finley said, tearing his arm away from her grip with a sudden, violent force. Gwen doesn't have a womb anymore. She almost died in this very room, and I told her she was putting on a show too. 3. He walked into the small study, slamming the door shut, leaving Lydia standing in the cold living room, her face twisted in a mixture of panic and rage. The next morning, Finley took the earliest train to the city. He went straight to the municipal archives, using his family's old connections to pull the civil and medical records of Lydia's divorce from 5 years ago. Sat in the dusty, quiet reading room, his hands trembling as he opened the leather-bound file. There, resting among the legal documents, was a certified letter from Lydia's ex-husband, filed with the city court. The marriage is dissolved due to the defendant's repeated infidelity with her supervisor. Furthermore, the termination of her pregnancy was carried out via a private clinic on the Friday prior to her departure from the city, as confirmed by the attached medical receipt. Finley's heart stopped. He stared at the dates. The medical receipt for Lydia's abortion was dated Friday, the 12th of October. Gwen had visited Lydia's cottage on Tuesday, the 16th of October, the day Lydia claimed Gwen had pushed her and caused her to lose the baby. Lydia had already aborted the child in the city to cover up her affair. She had come back to the village, waited for Gwen to visit her, and then staged a fall to frame my wife, binding Finley to her with a lifetime of guilt and obligation. And he had believed her. He had taken Gwen's beloved piano, the one he had saved for years to buy, and moved it to Lydia's house. He had cancelled their wedding ceremony. Had treated his wife like a cold-blooded murderer for 5 years. A dry choke sob escaped Finley's throat. He buried his face in the dusty documents, his body shaking violently as the absolute, crushing weight of his own stupidity and cruelty collapsed upon him. When Finley returned to the village, he was a broken man. He went straight to Lydia's cottage. He didn't knock. He threw the door open. His eyes wild, his face covered in a dark, uneven stubble. Lydia was sitting by her hearth, sipping tea. When she saw his face, she stood up quickly, her hands trembling. "Finley, what did you find?" Finley didn't say a word. He walked over to the corner of the room, where Gwen's beautiful mahogany piano sat. It was covered in a thick layer of dust. The polished keys were sticky with sweet tea Lydia had spilled, and a stack of cheap, city fashion magazines was piled on top of the delicate wood. With a sudden, furious roar, Finley swept the magazines off the piano, sending them flying across the room. "Finley!" Lydia shrieked, backing away. "Get out!" Finley whispered, his voice shaking with a dangerous, quiet rage. "What?" "Get out of this house, Lydia," Finley said, turning to look at her, his eyes red and hollow. "I saw the archive records. I saw the abortion receipt from the city. I saw the date." Lydia's face went completely, deathly pale. She stumbled back against the hearth, her hand flying to her mouth. "Finley, let me explain, it was a mistake. I was scared." "You ruined my life," Finley choked out, his voice cracking into a ragged sob. "You made me destroy the only woman who ever loved me. I aborted my own child. Because of your lies. I let my wife bleed to death on the floor because of your act. Finley, please. If I ever see your face in this town again," Finley said, his voice dropping to a chilly, dead whisper, "I will take these records to the local magistrate. I will make sure everyone in this province knows what kind of wretched, lying beast you are. Get out." Lydia didn't argue. Terrified by the raw, murderous look in his eyes, she grabbed her coat and fled into the freezing rain, her chronic cough echoing down the empty street. Left alone in the quiet cottage, Finley fell to his knees in front of the dusty piano. He pressed his forehead against the keys, a discordant, clashing chord echoing through the empty room. He remembered the way Gwen's fingers used to glide over the keys, her face soft and radiant in the candlelight. He remembered her laugh, her gentle touch, and the way she used to look at him as if he were her entire world. He had traded a diamond for a piece of rotten glass, and now he had nothing. 2 years passed. The City Music Academy was a grand, beautiful building with high arched windows and a courtyard filled with blooming white lilies. I sat at the grand piano in the main recital hall, my fingers moving gracefully over the keys, guiding a young girl through a soft, melancholic sonata. My life was quiet now. I lived with my parents in a beautiful house near the park, my days filled with the simple, healing routine of teaching music. My body had healed, though the faint, dull ache in my lower back occasionally reminded me of the winter I had left behind. But my heart was entirely at peace. I had no regrets. I had no anger. The memory of Finley and the village had faded into a distant, blurry dream, like a book I had read a long time ago and forgotten the details of. "That was beautiful, Lily," I smiled, patting the young girl's head as she finished the piece. "Go wash your hands. We'll start the next lesson after the break." "Thank you, Miss Gwen," the girl chirped, running out of the hall. I stood up, smoothing the front of my elegant, dark blue dress. I walked to the glass doors of the academy, intending to close the transom against the sudden, cool autumn rain that had started to fall. As I reached the door, I froze. A man was standing in the courtyard, completely drenched by the pouring rain. He was wearing a worn-out, threadbare coat, his shoulders hunched, his face thin and pale. His hair was streaked with gray, and his eyes were hollow, surrounded by dark, deep shadows of exhaustion. It was Finley. He looked like a ghost, a shell of the proud, arrogant husband who had once thrown me to the floor and mocked my blood. When he saw me through the glass, his eyes lit up with a sudden, desperate, and terrifying hope. He didn't try to open the door. He simply fell to his knees on the wet stone of the courtyard, his hands trembling as he reached toward the glass. Gwen. His voice was muffled by the rain, but I could read his lips perfectly. Gwen. I am sorry. I know the truth. I threw her out. I slowly pushed the glass door open, stepping out under the shelter of the stone archway. The cool wind blew a few drops of rain onto my face, but I didn't flinch. Get up, Finley, I said, my voice calm, polite, and entirely devoid of any emotion. Finley crawled closer, his wet fingers catching the hem of my dress, his forehead pressing against my leather shoes. He was sobbing hysterically, his body shaking violently in the cold air. Gwen, please come back, he begged, his voice cracked and ragged. I sold the house in the village. I bought you a new grand piano, Gwen. It's in the city. I've spent 2 years looking for you. I'll do anything. I'll be your servant. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. We can adopt. We can find a child. I looked down at his hunched, weeping form. In my past life, when he had thrown me into the freezing blizzard, I had begged him for mercy. I had crawled through the snow, my fingers turning black from the frost, screaming his name until my lungs filled with blood. He had looked at me with that exact same cold, disgust-filled expression and told me to feel the pain Lydia felt. Now, looking at him kneeling in the dirt, I felt no satisfaction. I felt no vengeful joy. I felt absolutely nothing. Finley, I said softly, my voice carrying a quiet finality. Do you know what the worst part of freezing to death is? Finley slowly lifted his head, his face wet with rain and tears, looking at me with a bewildered, desperate hope. It's the moment before you go numb, I whispered, a faint, gentle smile touching my lips. There is this intense, burning heat in your chest. You think you're on fire. And then, the cold takes over, and you feel nothing. Not pain. Not anger, not love. Just nothing. I stepped back, gently pulling the hem of my dress out of his trembling fingers. I felt that burning heat 5 years ago, Finley, I said. And now I am completely numb. I don't hate you. I don't want to punish you. But I will never go back to the cold. Gwen, please don't leave me. He wailed, reaching out his hands as I slowly backed away. Goodbye, Finley, I said. I closed the heavy glass doors, turning the lock with a quiet, decisive click. Through the glass, I watched him collapse onto the wet stone, his face buried in his hands, his weeping form swallowed by the gray, relentless rain. I turned around, walking back into the warm, brightly lit recital hall. The keys of the grand piano were waiting for me, and the clean, beautiful notes were ready to rise again. The storm was finally over, and I was warm,